Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
In my association with Project Blue, they definitely withheld information.
The whole fleet of them was on the ASA. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely.
All right, welcome back to Total Disclosure. I am your host, Ty, and I am the creator of the program. Today, we have an absolutely wonderful treat to literally kick off 2025. Today, we are joined by Congressman Eric Burlison. Congressman Burlison is a sixth-generation Missourian with 20 years of private sector experience as an investment advisor and software consultant. He's a 95 graduate from Parkview High School in Springfield and received a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and a Master of Business Administration from Missouri State University. He was elected to represent Missouri's 7th congressional district in 2022. He is an important person in our field of, UFOs, especially lately with the renewed energy that the topic is bringing, not just to mainstream media, but it's made its way all the way into government. And we've had 4 multiple hearings, 2 of which with witnesses on the stand, Eric being part of both of those. So, and he's also part of the House Oversight Committee. So with that being said, we want to welcome Mr. Congressman Burlison. All right, Congressman, thank you for joining us today.
Good to be on time.
So thankful for what you've done in not just you, but what the government is doing, holding these hearings, getting more involved with this subject, and trying to shed away some of this stigma in lieu of the scientific effort to kind of understand more about what's happening in our skies and our reality in general. So I just want to say thank you for joining us today. And as a member of the House Oversight Committee, how did your interest in the topic of UFOs and non-human intelligence begin?
I was watching the news whenever David Grush kind of came out as a whistleblower. He went on national news and was making an appeal to Congress. He was, making an assertion that based on he's leaving public office or leaving the government in order to blow the whistle and draw attention to members of Congress that the law is being violated and that there are special access programs that are not briefing members of Congress. And that alarmed me. And so being on the Oversight Committee, I reached out to David Grush through the media and was able to get a contact, had a conversation with him, and felt like there was enough merit to continue to do the investigation. And so did Tim Burchett and others, who then reached out to Chairman Comer. Now, when this happened, I was a brand new, still wet behind the ears freshman. I had been in office for just a few months, so I didn't even know where to begin when it came to investigating. But I'm glad that I'm on the committee, the Oversight Committee, because it's the exact committee that's designed for this.
Exactly. I got a chance after the hearing to speak with Nancy Mace, and I kind of took a knee and brought Robert Salas in with me. and he was able to talk to her about the event that happened to him in 1967 at Malmstrom Air Force Base, where 10 nuclear missiles were taken offline. And it had been mentioned previously by Representative Gallagher in the, I don't know if you remember the first
The
hearing that
2022
happened.
hearing or the 2021, I can't remember which year.
Yeah. It was the one where they had Scott Bray and Ronald Moultrie testifying to Congress. It was kind of what kicked this off. So he had mentioned the incident, and it kept coming up, and I was like, okay, you guys, you keep hearing about it. Why has no one reached out to Bob yet? Like he's the one who can tell you the entire story. So it was really fun to get to do that. And I would love to talk about Bob a little bit later, but it's exactly, we need more people like you in Congress that are dedicated to trying to figure this out. And you're not afraid of the stigma. Does it ever, like, are you afraid that, people at home are going to call you a kook or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's one of those things. You don't want this to be the thing that you're labeled as or that you're known for, because, I have a long history. I was a state legislator, House member, and state senator, passed a lot of very substantive bills, things that had tremendous impact in Missouri. For example, I passed medical malpractice tort reform. I passed right to work laws, labor related laws that really had significant impact. Passed a lot of Second Amendment laws in Missouri, giving citizens back their rights. Very substantive, massive changes to the federal code. And when you look at the bevy of work that I have on the federal level, there's a lot of significant bills that I'm sponsoring. Many of them are business related. And so and yet you do all of those things, and then the one thing that you start getting labeled as is the UFO guy. And I think that's a little bit frustrating. But it certainly is something that piques a lot of interest. And so for me, I feel like we have a responsibility.
Thank you.
We have a responsibility. There's a lot of money being spent. We have a national security potential threat that I think we need to investigate and determine exactly what's going on. And so I think that we owe it to the American people to continue to investigate it.
Right. Because now, I kind of want to start with this whole drone thing that's going on. Obviously, it's not in your district. I mean, not that I know of. It might be. I mean, it seems like it's everywhere.
In my district, I have a lot of cousins and rednecks that would shoot down any drone in the sky.
That's amazing. That's why they won't fly over the southern area, right? They know they're going to get taken down. But this drone thing in New Jersey is really, really sparking people's interest. It's in the media every single day. These things are seemingly breaching our most sensitive airspace, and we don't know where they're coming from. We don't know who's flying them. These things are supposed to be, some of them are alleged to be SUV size. I mean, what's going on, Congressman? If you can share your insight.
I don't know, but I do know, like, we do have drones, even in commercial use, that are pretty large. I mean, I was at a demonstration to see instead of having planes do crop dusting, there are drones that are big enough and large enough to actually fulfill that role. And I've seen them firsthand, and they're pretty large. So I think that we underestimate how far the private sector has gone when it comes to these drones. But I will say the fact that these things are appearing in the sky with the same blinking lights that a drone has is probably the first clue that it's not something that's extraterrestrial.
I agree. And a lot of I think a lot of it, you'll notice that anytime something like this happens, everyone starts looking to the sky, and then they just start, reporting everything they see. 99% misidentification. or prosaic explanation. However, there is that remaining 1%, right? And over the East Coast, I mean, at least the drones that I know of, there's a function that's built into these things usually that if it does hit a restricted airspace, it either lands right there or it returns to sender. So I guess where I'm going with it is, how seriously does the government view these incidents in terms of national security threats, that they're able to fly over, sensitive facilities? Is the White House and the Pentagon, they say they don't know what they are, but they're not a threat.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not on the committees that would be able to get access to that information, whether or not they are a threat, but I've not been briefed I'm not on Armed Services Committee or Intel. So I think that the information I have is the same information that the public has.
Right.
And so I think that, and I think it's just, common sense that these are probably, it's either private commercial use where they're going awry. The most nefarious case would be that it's espionage. I do think that China, some of the briefings I've been in have indicated that the level of espionage that China is involved in the United States, everything from, drones to, they're embedding, students in our universities in order to steal intellectual property. Mm-hmm. There's a level that I would say, when people ask me what surprised you in the 2 years you've been in office, that's probably one of my biggest surprises is the level and the extent at which China is involved in espionage in the United States.
Right. And now, can I ask you something? Like, this is going to get a little political. I can't believe I just asked if I could ask you something on a podcast, but I mean, it's super redundant. But if the United States tried to buy land in China or farms in China, it wouldn't happen. To put it simply, right. How come? Is it weird to you that like countries like Saudi Arabia and China are continuing to buy up land in the United States?
It is. It's very disturbing. And I think, like, for example, one of the things that the Biden family, that with what they were investigated for, was them working to create shell companies so that China or others can purchase either land or other infrastructure, or other energy related companies in the United States without anyone knowing about it. So, we investigated that. I think that there's no disputing that was the case. I think Tony Bobolinsky admitted that, but basically there are loopholes that are being exploited that allow for foreign individuals and foreign governments to purchase things in America. And it's something that we need to put a stop to.
I couldn't agree more. It's asinine. And not to mention, I mean, China's Belt and Road Initiative that they're employing in South America, Africa, and other undeveloped, third world countries. They're essentially, dealing with people that the U.S. has said, okay, you're not reliable, or you have a dictator in charge, we can't do business with you. And China's like, we will, and then they build highways, and, all they ask is that, one day we might need to use them. We might need to land some planes here and take it over as a military base. It's frightening how close it's getting. And then, of course, our southern border. Unfortunately. So do you think that the United States has handicapped themselves in certain capacities in dealing with other countries and to help developing nations?
That's a good question. I think that our trade policies have handicapped us. We go back all the way to the Marshall Plan after World War II that allowed for countries like Japan to have trade policies where, U.S. car makers can't sell into Japan, but yet they can sell in the United States, and as well as Germany. You're not seeing American vehicles being sold in Europe, but yet they're selling their cars here in America. There's structural things that I think that the Trump administration, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I think that it should be bipartisan, an agreement that we need to reevaluate our trade policies and agreements with these foreign countries, and determine what's good for the United States.
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it better myself. Switching gears, you've had a lot of you've done a lot of work in the private sector that led you to inevitably, I would assume, running for office. Can you talk about what you did prior to becoming the congressman?
Yeah, I worked in the private sector. First, I was a software engineer. I paid my way through college by building websites back in the early and late 90s.
Oh.
And then just was like studying philosophy, and then eventually studying finance in college. And so I graduated and got a job immediately working in a hospital system, developing one of the very first patient portals in the country. So this was, honestly, there were very few, if any, patient portals that existed. It was a brand new field. And so we were carving new territory. And so we built that, and I was the lead programmer. And after it was completed, then we won a national award. Our hospital system did, for the patient portal. And a lot of companies ended up using a lot of the intellectual property that we had developed in that. And so it gave me tremendous job security. And I continued to consult in healthcare IT for 20 years. And then I, along the way, I've got my license to be an investment advisor, and then became an independent investment advisor.
Awesome. So you were part of the big internet boom, if you will, back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, I was a low man on the totem pole. I wasn't part of,
yeah, you weren't Elon Musk, right? I get it.
Right. I was being paid to program that application. And had I done it independently and then sold it.
So you work in the private sector for 20 years. You then, what makes you decide to run for office?
Yeah, that's my personal faith that really kind of drove that. I was a born again Christian, and I see that our First Amendment rights, our right to worship, is really kind of slowly being eroded. And so I really paid attention to who was running for office, and wanted to, back people that wanted to protect those rights. And then as I started paying attention to politics, learned that I really think that what's unique about America is that we're a country that's based on this bottom-up idea that our rights are given to us by either natural law or by our creator, and that government is created by the people. It's not, our rights don't come from government. And so that kind of is what really drives me, is to retain what is, I think, a very precious thing, that is a different way of doing things with the United States of America that no country has ever done before. And I want to continue to retain that. And so originally I would just back elected officials or people that were running for office that held those values. I would donate to their campaigns, or I would build them a free website, stuff envelopes, put up signs, whatever I could do. I just was trying to help good people get elected. And then at one point, somebody tapped me on the shoulder in the community and said that I have enough credibility that I would make it for a good candidate. And it just kind of worked out in my life. It was the right timing. And so I ran for state representative and won, and the rest is history.
I suppose, right? Yeah, the rest, now it is literal history. So, okay, you come in, now you're in office at a pretty tumultuous time, to say the least. And you start going through, and these hearings are sprung with the UFO topic, UAP topic. How did you first feel about taking part in said hearings and said conversation, given your born again faith, your Christianity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Christian community, there's a lot of people that have concerns about how it's going to affect their worldview, and I think that the more confidence that you have in your faith, and the more that you actually study the Bible, that it's not really contradictory to our worldview at all. In fact, it underscores quite a bit of especially the stories that happen in the Old Testament. And so I could go into greater detail about that, but I think that there's some people that it would challenge their faith. And so because of that, they shy away from the discussion, or they immediately have a mental block about it. That's not my perspective. I mean, I'm willing to be open to the idea of, aliens from another planet or extra dimensions, things like that. I'm willing to be open to them, but I continue to remain that we need to be skeptical until we can validate things, because I think that one of the mistakes that we get involved with, scientifically, humanity has made a lot of mistakes in asserting things that there was no scientific validity for. Like the Earth is the center of the solar system. The sun is the center of the universe, or the Earth is the center of the universe, before validating that scientifically, or being open to what new science is going to reveal to us. So I just think that having a level set, a healthy perspective on things, and understanding that we don't know everything, but until we can validate things, it's not really smart to make bold statements.
Right, like absolute statements that I know this.
Right.
Does it ever? But because I've asked Tim Burchett this as well. Do you ever fear that there's faction in government that is maybe a little bit too? Maybe they put the religious lens on this too hard, and they think that if we start talking about it, then we're talking about or invoking demons and
Right.
stuff like that. Does that ever worry you, that the line between religion and government is blurring?
I've heard that claim. I'm not so sure that that's the case.
Okay.
I think it's more about, there's power in having access to things that other people do not have access to. And so to me, that power is something that is what a lot of the, special access programs, or individuals that do have access, they don't want to give that up. The moment that they do, then they lose power. And there's one thing that is a commodity in Washington, D.C., and that is power.
Yes. That is saying it lightly. With Grush specifically, I want to kind of talk about what happened with Grush. You guys, not you guys, but you know what I mean. You had the hearing. There was a lot that he could not talk about publicly, and then you guys were alleged or trying to get him inside a skiff.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that has not happened to date, as so far as we know. Why is that happened, or how did that happen, and what are we trying to do to fix or remedy that situation?
That's a good question. I've tried a lot of things. So one of the things I explored is trying to bring Grush on as a staff of my team. So, and I think David is willing to make nearly nothing if it works. When we explored that, it still wouldn't give us the ability to get him into a skiff and provide the information that we needed. So that was kind of a dead end there. I think that one of the things that I've explored or I've presented to the speaker and to Chairman Comer, and Chairman Comer is open to it. I haven't heard anything positive or negative from the speaker, but to try to create a special subcommittee that has jurisdiction over the UAP topic, because and given a need to know, because that's what's necessary in order to get a lot of these clearances, is that while every member of Congress has the ability to have a clearance that goes all the way to the top. The question is, do you have the need to know?
Right.
And so if we give that, if the speaker could create a committee and give it the ability to have the need to know, then I think that we should hire people like David Grush or Lou Elizondo, people who are formerly worked in the institutions that know where the bodies are buried, if either figuratively or literally, and be able to bring them in so that they know where to go to get about the information.
Do you ever wonder, or do you ever not wonder, that I guess that would be the wrong word for it, but do you ever think that you're tipping your hands, like for instance, by getting Grush in a skiff, ultimately he would be able to give you locations and people, hostile or not. Do you think that they are now on to that fact and they're kind of shell gaming it?
Yeah, and I think that they probably are already onto it. I've been told that even if the moment that already any objects that did exist in a facility are probably already moved by this point, just based on the all of the different hearings that we've had and the conversations that they're aware of.
Right.
So we've been given some facility locations that are potential sites. And the irony is, I walk out of a skiff thinking, here's a couple of locations that we need to look at, and yet just the names or the locations are top secret. So how do I even begin to go about investigating that when those facilities, those locations, those names are top secret? I can't even tell my staff
and that
what to look into.
And that's a real blockade. That's a real blockade. And then there's also people, I don't want to say the names, but do you think that there are efforts in Congress by your colleagues, not, your colleagues as in congressmen, do you think that there are efforts on the inside to block essentially any advancement on this?
Yeah, no, I don't think I know. I mean, we had language that we tried to get into the National Defense Authorization Act. Tim Burchett had language. Then Chuck Schumer had language to his benefit. I mean, I don't agree with Chuck Schumer on nearly anything, but I do agree on his efforts to try to provide disclosure. And sadly, all of that was blocked by Mike Turner and some other members of the intelligence community in the House, of all places. Somehow they had enough clout to stop the president of the Senate or Chuck Schumer and the speaker or other members of the House from getting the language that we're trying to get passed.
Right.
So yes, absolutely, we do have people within our that are elected officials that are trying to stop this information from getting out.
Do you think it's at all coincidence that Mike Turner is backed by or has major contributions from private aerospace and is the person that represents the district that Wright-Patterson is, where many of these things in UFO lore are considered to be, that's like the home of them?
I'm not going to draw any conclusions there. I'm going to give a colleague the benefit of the doubt. He probably has a strongly held belief that there's a fundamental reason why that shouldn't be publicly disclosed. I don't want to cast aspersions.
No, I understand.
So, he's somebody I work with. He's probably has his perspective, and I can't really speak for him and why he doesn't agree with some of the amendments that Chuck Schumer or Tim Burchett have tried to put forward.
Understood. So I asked Twitter, or I guess it's X now. I can't get used to that, but I asked if anyone wanted to submit a question, that I'd pick a couple. There's at the Friar Eli asked a really good question. And he said, during the most recent UFO hearing, Eric Burlison, you quoted the Liberation Times regarding the alleged transfer of a retrieved craft of unknown origin to the OSAP program. For anyone who doesn't know, that's the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program.
Right.
So unknown origin to OSAP from Lockheed Martin. Has he spoken to sources behind the scenes to confirm the legitimacy of this claim? Sorry, it goes on here. Additionally, what are his and his colleagues' plans to follow up on that revelation? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I submitted some questions to Lou Elizondo. I'm going to grab those real quick.
Please.
And these are not, this is not classified information. His responses to the emails that I sent, in essence, verified that there was an attempt to transfer material from Lockheed Martin, who's in possession of some materials, to Bigelow Aerospace, and that OSAP was the agency that was coordinating that.
Right.
There was, I believe it was $22 million that was budgeted, that was going towards a facility in Nevada that Bigelow Aerospace was building. And so the fact that there was money dedicated for a facility and work was underway to transfer material, and that they testified that the CIA did step in and stop that transfer. It suggests that there is probably something that, whether it's extraterrestrial or not, like whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
There's some material that Lockheed Martin is in possession of that the CIA blocked from being transferred over to Bigelow Aerospace.
Now, that is, I have you heard the name Jim Lukatsky?
I believe so. You may have to refresh my memory.
So he was the essentially the top dog of OSAP. So he ran OSAP, and in an episode of Weaponized, when he was speaking to George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, he had said that OSAP in fact did have a craft and they were able to breach the hull. He later goes on to say that he would lie to Congress under oath in order to protect national security. So maybe that's something that you can look into.
Yeah, we'll have to reach out to him, see if he's willing to talk.
I would assume that is someone that so him, Hal Puthoff, and Eric Davis. What is stopping the House Oversight Committee or anybody from bringing them in and essentially saying, "Tell me what you know"?
Yeah, Eric Davis is the one that wrote that the report.
Yep.
After interviewing a colonel, was it, or someone? That
yes,
was,
Admiral Thomas Wilson.
Okay, and as far as I know, he's not verified that report did belong to him or that was accurate. Is that right?
Correct. But even in the document, he says that if you betray my trust and this gets out, I will deny that this meeting ever happened. I will not acknowledge it. Yet, assumingly,
Right.
Unless he was brought in and told, you need to tell us what you know, yada, yada.
Yeah, my view is that we need to have an ongoing series of hearings that would be open to the public, whether it's done through a subcommittee or done independently. You know, members of Congress can hold their own hearings. Now, when people come into those hearings, you cannot subpoena them. They cannot be under oath. So they don't have the level of credibility that a oversight hearing would have.
Right.
But it is possible. And it's just my view that when you're in these hearings and you only have 5 minutes to ask questions, it's not enough time. And it's not enough time to really break apart the conversation. So I wish that, for example, the 5 minutes I had, I really wanted that 5 minutes with Lou Elizondo just to be an hour. And,
Right.
and we could really probably get to a lot of, answers. Now, that's why I submitted a lot of questions after the hearing, hoping to get some. But, for every question you ask, and just to give your listeners, a perspective of what it's like to be in my shoes, is imagine you've built up to that moment. Like you and your team have worked on different questions that you're going to ask. And then you get into that hearing. And especially if you're a freshman like me, you're one of the last people to get to ask questions. So your questions have already been asked. Most of the questions have already been asked. And then when you do get a chance to ask questions, it's like riding a bull, like in a rodeo. So the gate opens, you ask one question, and the answer could take you in a different direction than you thought you might be going down. And if you don't catch what the person is saying, then you may miss something, right? So you've got a list of questions in front of you. You're trying to get through your list, but the truth is, after the hearing, there's so many moments where you think to yourself, "Oh, I wish I had followed up with this question," right? Or asked it in a different way. And so it's just really a frustrating endeavor. You try to do the best that you can, but what's frustrating is that 5 minute block that is, I don't know, some arbitrary number, the way in which Congress does it. In the state legislatures, they do not do that. They in the Missouri House, at least, in the Missouri Senate, you let members ask questions as they think of the question, right? You certainly could, you begin with like an order of seniority, but after the seniority, it's just, as people start saying, witnesses start saying things, it will prompt questions that people had not thought of before. And so, and you can ask one question. You don't have to ask 5 minutes of questions. You could just ask the one that you want to ask at that moment and then move on. I like the state model a lot better. I think it gets to the bottom of the truth of things. I think that the model that we have in Congress is designed for political theater. It's designed for theater. It's designed so that you get your 5 minutes that is clipped so that you can throw it on YouTube or social media and you got your 5 minute clip.
Oh my God.
I think that's what it's designed for.
Oh my God. You just blew my mind. You're absolutely right. It's set up for mainstream media clips. It's the 5 minute, right? So do you think, is there a way to change? I didn't even think. And that's why I think conversations like this ultimately are going to be the way forward. These long form conversations. I mean, you look at Rogan and Donald Trump, right? And then the fact, not to go on this, kind of tirade right now, he was asked to do, Trump was asked to do the show, did it 3 hours at his age, at 70 something years old, didn't even by hour 3. That's when you really get to know somebody, because that's when the barriers start coming down, right? And the talking points start to fall away. And Trump was just on it. The guy is just a machine. And then the fact that the whole fiasco with Harris, how she wanted to bring Rogan out to this location, only do it for an hour under controlled environment. It just clearly said something to the world, to the nation, that these are two different people, and which one do you want to run the country? And I think the country overwhelmingly spoke. But that's just a clear demonstration visually that, like, the mainstream media they're just not what people want anymore. They don't want these sound bites that can be manipulated.
Hmm. Yeah, I learned a lot from the Joe Rogan interviews with Grush and Elizondo. I learned a lot, especially researching before the hearings. They were able to delve into a lot of these topics a lot better than we are in these hearings, for sure.
So just to make sure I heard that right, you watched the Grush episode of Rogan and
Mhm.
Elizondo's before their hearings, respectively?
I don't know if the Grush hearing, the one with Grush, happened after our hearing. I think it happened after.
It did. You're right. But you listened to them
But
in preparation?
yeah, I listened to. I try to devour as much as I possibly can.
Wow, that's amazing.
Anytime that, yeah.
That just will, you don't know how far that will go to people in the community, that you're actually listening and doing your homework. Because I think aside from there's a couple complaints with the hearings, and this is just feedback from the community to you, a congressman, is people really hate hearing, "Oh, I can't talk about that in an open session,"
Mhm.
and I think there's no way to get around it. It's a complaint. It is what it is. But the second thing, is that they feel that not enough of the members actually do their homework. But
Mhm.
that's not the case with you. I find that to be very refreshing, because that's Burchett as well, Luna, and Gallagher in that first one when he brought up the
Mhm.
67 Malmstrom case. You knew that this guy knew what he was talking about, and
Yeah, and I think
it's refreshing.
I watched that hearing as well, and I think Gallagher's line of questions about the gap, the historical gap between Project Blue Book and the ATIP or the OSAP program, I think was pretty telling. I think that's an area that the fact that the federal government, I mean, you cannot tell me that there was not some agencies that were involved in investigating this phenomenon, and in that what was it, like a 40-year period of time, or
Yes.
that nothing was going on. I don't believe that whatsoever. And so,
No.
but that seems to be the narrative that they try to spin. And I thought
So
Gallagher's line of question on that was pretty good.
right, I know. Everyone in the community was like baffled at, just because up until that point it had been kind of like a nothing burger. It was just no one was asking the right questions, and then all of a sudden he came out just hammering them, and it was like, and I remember them both looking at each other at one point like, have you heard about the Davis Wilson notes?
Yeah.
And they kept
Well,
saying it wrong.
they were so those guys are so over compartmentalized, they wouldn't know. That's
They
what
wouldn't.
one of the things that I think that we've concluded, or I've concluded, is that that it's really a overarching special access program, and it may be called Immaculate Constellation. That may be what it's called. I don't know, but that certainly was what we heard in the latest hearing, and that it's embedded in the White House. So it's under what is the National Security Advisor currently, Jake Sullivan, under his authority, and so all of the outside of that umbrella, they're compartmentalizing all the information, or all the, whether it's propulsion or other technology, they're compartmentalizing it into different special access programs within different agencies of the federal government, from the Department of Energy to Department of Defense and Department of Intelligence. So you've got, or the intelligence community. So you've got different, they're slicing it up and compartmentalizing it. So when you ask a question of these individuals from the Air Force, they're going to know some information, but they're not going to know the overall or overarching information. It gives them plausible deniability.
Absolutely. So speaking of that, this is another question. So given the secrecy often associated with UAP investigations, how difficult is it to oversee organizations like the Department of Defense or intelligence agencies on this matter?
How difficult is it to, I'm sorry?
Oversee organizations like the DoD
So,
or
so for example, you've got, for all of these agencies, you have offices of Inspector General. So you have the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General, you have the Intelligence Community's Office of Inspector General, and they both um, validated Grush's claim that there's over compartmentalization and that they are not disclosing what they're doing to Congress. Congress has a right to have the access to the information. I think that the fact that they are holding the overarching information in the executive branch, which is the second Article 2 of the Constitution under the president, I think that protects them or gives them some distance from Congress. But at the end of the day, when they're working with government agencies that we fund, Congress has, and so we basically have to work backwards unless we get direct information from the White House.
Then that sucks.
It does. And the other thing is, like, all of these hearings, in order to get these witnesses, especially the ones that have clearance, you have to get approval from, I believe they call it the four corners of each committee. So when you bring in someone from, you have to get the approval of the House Armed Services Committee. You have to get both the chairman and the ranking member have to approve it on the House side and on the Senate side. You have to get approval from the Intel Committee chairman and the ranking member before you can even bring these witnesses forward. So that is another obstacle that you have to go through these hoops just to bring forward witnesses to testify.
Well, that is actually really good segue. So another user asked, and I'm not at JOAOCAR and then a bunch of numbers. George Knapp claims that testimony from whistleblowers who claim to have firsthand knowledge at the last hearing was not allowed. Were you aware of this incident? If so, why was the partition of these alleged complaints not authorized?
I'm not aware of that there was information that was not allowed in the hearing. I know that there was a little bit of a controversy as far as the document that was released, that there was a missing page. I think that, and I've heard rumors about what that was about. And some of those rumors are that basically is just trying to not put into the public record something that would promote an individual or their social media. And so that was the extent of that, but I don't know all the details there.
So Corbell, and I hate to say this, but because I like Corbell, I met him that day. I think he's a good guy, but he seemed to have access that no one else had. He was coming in and out of the where the witnesses came in, where you guys were coming in. If there was a page that was submitted and lost, now he's throwing shade at Congress and saying that you guys weren't telling the truth. I hate to put you on the spot, but how does that make you feel?
I don't know what the details were there, but like I would say, this is the same thing that is happening there is the same thing that's happening in the federal government, where you have, as I mentioned before, people want to control the information. And if you can control the information, you have power. In the federal government, that gives you power over agencies, power over contracts and other things. In the private sector, if you're controlling access to the information, you can get book deals, you can get documentaries, whatever it is. And I'm not trying to cast aspersions. I'm just saying that there is always going to be an innate desire for people to hold that information and keep it under their own lock and key, right? Because it's of value. The moment you provide that to the public and make it totally disclosed, you've lost all of your all of your value. And so I'm not saying ill of anybody. I'm just saying that is a dynamic that we have to work with, is that we know that a lot of the people that are coming forward or that are involved in this space have self-motivation involved. And that, I don't think that's an evil thing or a bad thing. It's just something that we have to keep in mind.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And a lot of people are going to be happy to hear you say that. I can guarantee that, because one of the things that I fear is circular reporting. Does that ever worry you, that, some of this stuff that you think has been corroborated by, or is being told to you by 4 different people, actually just came from the one source telling everybody, that circular reporting style? Do you ever wonder if anything that you're hearing or getting is disinformation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I even asked Lou Elizondo point blank. I asked him, I said, one of the theories out there is that this is a psyop and that you're part of it, that you worked in the intelligence community. If you want to control this information that's coming out, why not take control of it and leak what you want? Or one of the and Lou's response to me was, I think it gave me a little bit more comfort. But at the end of the day, I still hold to what I said in that very first hearing. The very first statement I said to David Grush and others is that I'm from Missouri and I do not trust you. I don't trust anybody in this town. And so I'm going to listen and I'm going to absorb. But at the end of the day, you cannot be gullible or just rely on what everybody is telling you as the gospel truth. And so you've got to have a little bit of skepticism going in.
So there have been claims, obviously, of biological materials associated with UAPs. From your position, are there efforts to investigate the authenticity of these claims?
I think we're certainly trying to verify these claims. Whenever I was in the hearing and I asked the question of David Grush, I thought his answer was pretty interesting, which is that these biologics were collected. He was born, so that's pretty interesting. And the other thing that he's alluded to is that while it may be life, he said, keep in mind that there's forms of life that we may not find immediately recognizable, right? So different types of material that is actually a form of life. So, take that where you want to go with it, but to me it says that what's collected is not a carbon-based biological, organic being. It's something different. And so what that is, if that's the case, then it seems as though, based on his testimony, that it's something different than something organic or biological in that way.
Right. Wow. Because that's that's intriguing on so many levels, because a lot of people, I'm sure you've heard, from just so much testimony maybe that you've consumed, but that obviously, the archetypal, like, little gray alien.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of people think that they act,
Yeah.
or that they're very robotic in in their movements and yada yada. So could it be something like that, that we've collected from a crash retrieval program? That's very interesting.
And I don't know what he was referring to, but I've also heard that postulated that the documented gray aliens are some kind of robot or a drone or an AI, that they are very simplistically formed or created.
Right.
And so I don't know. I've never seen one, obviously, but that's the goal. I mean, at the end of the day, I want us to get to a point where if these things do exist, that there's no reason why something that wasn't created by the federal government, by the United States, should be held in top secret. And if it doesn't belong to the federal government, it belongs to humanity. And if it does exist, we need to put it on display. Let the public see it, feel it, touch it, right? So
Right.
that's what my ultimate goal is.
That would be like if the federal government tried to say that snakes didn't exist, right? It's like you can't do that. That's not your knowledge to cover up. It's part of ultimately it's part of nature. It's
Mhm.
part of reality. And I don't think listen and listen, I want to make myself like super clear. I understand that for the same reason we don't allow everyone to have nuclear weapons, that we wouldn't want everyone having access to some of these technologies that are, you know, allegedly far superior to our own and, potentially have dual use because with technology, you can use a hammer to make a house or to kill somebody, right? So I understand that. So, but there's got to be a middle. If these things are real, if non-human intelligence exists, that is not a for-profit industry.
Right. And it doesn't belong to a particular government. It belongs, I mean, the discovery of anything, scientific, doesn't belong to any particular government agency. It belongs to the people. The science behind it belongs to the public. It now weaponizing it and the way in which you do that, I can see how you'd want to make some of that classified. But for example, like nuclear physics is not classified. Building a nuclear bomb is,
Right.
and there's a distinction. So
And speaking of that, a lot of people have talked lately about the Department of that we might be looking at the wrong thing, or not looking at the wrong thing, but searching in the wrong places, and that it's actually this falls under the guise of the Department of Energy classifications because these things, under the Atomic Secrecy Act, anything that produces a radiological signature would therefore fall under that secrecy. Um, is that something that you guys are aware of and potentially discussing?
yes, yeah, it's especially after this last hearing where we learned that the Immaculate Constellation program is basically an overarching program over multiple agencies. It including the Department of Energy. It's something that, and I'd heard those rumors before. The Department of Energy was one of the was one that some of this information was being if this information was being kept. So it certainly is an area that we need to explore.
I definitely agree. So if confirmed, now this is obviously going into the future, but I mean, if confirmed evidence of a non-human intelligence were revealed, what steps should the government take to prepare the public for such a disclosure?
I think that I don't think that the government's responsibility is to try to prepare everyone's worldview. I mean, we're not living in a safe space, right? This is not. Um, I think that government is everyone's parent. So at the end of the day, the government is owned by the people, which was one of the first things I said in this interview. And if you have that worldview, as Americans should, then we need to be constantly fighting to ensure that the government is reminded that that we own them, they don't own us, and that
Right.
they work for us. We're the parent, and the federal government is the child that we created. And so we need to make sure that we're in control of that information. And if the federal government's going to release it, they the fact that they have. So I don't think
Right.
it's going. I personally, going back to my Christian worldview, I one of the in the reason one of the podcasts that I've listened to is that kind of got me down a road of inquiring is a podcast called The Blurry Creatures, and it introduced me to a guy named Timothy Marino, who I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's got a very fascinating book and a theory about how this phenomenon fits in with the Christian biblical narrative, and really, I think, underscores a lot of the narrative in the Bible. So the fact that people, if you really think about it, the fact that people were documenting these things 1,000 years ago is pretty fascinating if that's the case.
Yeah, it's something that obviously I've talked at length with Tim about Burchett, and he talks about Ezekiel and the wheel, and how these things have been essentially documented since recorded history. So this is nothing new. So it sounds like that is one of your beliefs as well.
I don't know what at this point, until I see it again, I'm going to remain skeptical. I do believe that what I will say is what I strongly believe is that I don't believe that we without being created. To me, there's a lot of philosophical arguments that have well defined that, like the ontological argument. I think that this universe clearly has a design that from a creator that surpasses our understanding. And I think that when you look at the history of and the fact that you look through the documents of the Old Testament and the New Testament, to me, there's a very compelling case that the creator of the universe is trying to send a message to his creation, which is us, through the history and the events that happened to a particular people, the people of Israel. And so when you pull all of those storylines together, the fact that they so beautifully weave the same narrative over a period of thousands of years is to me the most compelling argument for the existence of God that there is. And so that being said, I mean, the Bible in its early chapters talks about beings are not from this world. So whether it's Genesis 6 or from the beginning when it talks about the fall of one of the angels or the group of angels that fell, a third of the angels fell. Now the question, what Timothy would say, Timothy Alberino, is that angel is just a definition for a messenger of God. It's not a creature. It's not a species or a race. It's simply a moniker or a title given to anything that's carrying a message from God. And so these messengers of God they came to Earth and interacted with humanity. In some cases, caused disruption, caused havoc, and in other cases, tried to convey messages from the Creator to us. And I think that that does. Well, some people we call them angels, and we think of this ethereal, this spiritual thing that then whenever you talk about what are aliens from another planet or aliens from an interdimension, you talk about these other things. It's not you're speaking the same language you're speaking the same concepts in a different language, if that makes sense.
No, it
So
absolutely does.
That's why I don't think that Christians should be worried about it. In fact, I think that Christians need to constantly reevaluating the scripture and to determine how does, and questioning previously held beliefs that may not be congruent with scripture.
Right. I often think about that and the similarities, uh, uh, the similarities from the Bible and other religious texts. I don't really fall under one religion at this time. I definitely believe in a God. I myself am sober, and for that to have happened, there's got to be some higher power. It's just like you said, you look around and from the micro all the way to the macro, there's intelligence. It's you look around, it's all I don't know if you've seen this, but did you see they finally got a good picture of like it was I think it was two electron or photons entangled, and it looks almost identical to the yin and yang symbol.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy, right? So it's like you got to wonder, like, did our ancestors do you think that there could be potentially an ancient civilization that that had technology?
I think that we underestimate what ancient humans, the intelligence of ancient humans. I think that we kind of assume that they are Neanderthals, that they weren't as intelligent as us. But when you look at some of the megalithic sites, whether it's Machu Picchu or Göbekli Tepe, like
Just
there's,
the fact that you're saying these is blowing my mind.
yeah, I mean, these places are ancient, and the fact that they carved these massive megaton structures and lifted them up mountains, there's a technology that I think that we are underestimating the the intellect and the level of advancement of our of previous civilizations.
I and a good bridge here is now we look at like something like Göbekli Tepe, right? And I mean, I don't I think they've only really uncovered like a small portion of it. If I'm correct, I don't know. I don't have a Jamie right now to just bring it up for me like Rogan, but um we look at these structures and other structures in Turkey specifically, lots of underground facilities that seemed like they were able to house whole civilizations or whole societies for long, and they could sustain them for long periods of time, which got me thinking about um, what would be the best place to to shelter yourself from natural disaster, from everything, and that's underground. And something that's been coming up a lot in the UFO community is that our military has these things, has a lot of these deep underground military bases or DUMBs. It's something that you mentioned to me before we started recording. We know that these facilities exist. It's to what degree they exist in and to
Mhm.
what they're using them for. Um, are you aware of any of these installations?
I have never been to one. I'm aware that they exist. I've been told that there's even some that are in my area, Southwest Missouri. I haven't verified that. It has me actually pondering which facilities that people might be talking about. But there's that in Southwest Missouri, we're known as the cave state, and there's a
Absolutely.
lot of underground structure in our area, including a place that's called Springfield Underground, where it's almost an entire city that's underground. You can drive semi trucks down multiple lanes like in through roads and in an underground structure. That structure, you know, it's a place to house data centers, um, a lot of things that you may not want to be susceptible to a natural disaster, or you want a controlled climate. You put it in an underground uh, facility like that. There's also a place in Branson called the Mountain that's a very highly secure facility that has a lot of data centers in it, and some other artifacts. I believe that there's artifacts from the Titanic that are stored in this underground data center. So in
My
Branson,
God.
of all places. So it's it certainly is possible, and I think that if you're going to try to avoid satellite imagery or avoid even really the potential risk of a natural disaster, what better place to to store something than underground in Southwest Missouri?
That, oh my God. So enti- entire like semi trucks are able to drive in and enter this secure facility.
Yeah, it's a massive facility. It's called Springfield Underground, and actually, a friend of mine owns the property, the enterprise. He made money mining it out, and then is making money leasing the space in this massive underground structure. And so, yeah,
Who is
it's
he leasing it to?
to multiple businesses, multiple companies. Some of them are governments, and some of it is most of it is private sector.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to really dig too much deep because there's also reports. There's a woman, and she was actually at the hearing in December, and she in Arizona. Her name's Melinda Leslie, and she says that she found essentially an entrance to an underground facility, essentially, and outside there's a Lockheed Martin sign, and they have the deed to property all around that area in Arizona, and it really begs the question, um, because obviously we hear about these places like Area 51. I
Mhm.
can almost guarantee that nothing that would be extraterrestrial or non-human is there anymore. Too many
Right,
people know about it. I mean,
right.
it's a cultural thing now. Like everyone just assumes that Area 51, right? Alien technology. So I mean, the chances of it actually being in a facility like that anymore, I think, are very slim. But these deep underground military bases, that is a whole different story. I mean, they say they say that under Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, there's, you know, uh, a whole other base essentially, like essentially the same size, just underground 20 stories. Um, have has has anyone pointed these to any of these locations and said, probably should go look there?
Not a deep underground military base, no. I mean, I've not been told in any of these hearings or in our SCIF meetings to go look at, what you call a dumb or what's been called a dumb. We've been given some locations that that to go look at, but but again, as I said before, just even talking about those would be um, violating the security clearance that we had. So um,
Understood.
it's difficult. Yeah. Now they weren't underground, and it's one of there may be underground structures underneath these facilities, but what I do
Right.
doubt is that I doubt that Lockheed Martin is keeping if they do have objects that they're keeping it under a building with the title Lockheed Martin, right? Um, if be more obvious. I mean, it'd be way too obvious. So I would imagine that they would probably be some other shell company or other title that they could put on the front of a building.
Right. So I know multiple people who have testified to Arrow, and their cases involve A, the shutdown of nuclear weapons, B, the the Atlas test missile that was being filmed. A UAP comes into frame, kind of fires like a laser at it, and does it all like a 360 around it, shooting laser at. Then the thing comes tumbling out of the sky. So those incidents are the Bob Jacobs is Vandenberg, Robert Salas Malmstrom, then Dave Schindele of Minot Air Force Base, 1967, where they turned the nuclear weapons on, not off. And then someone like Mario Woods, who was a security police officer, military police, and was dispatched to a nuclear silo at Ellsworth, and it was codenamed, the launch site was codenamed November 5. He was dispatched. They get there. They see this school bus size glowing orb of red light, is what he says. And then the atmosphere in the truck became so thick that they passed out. When he woke up, their car was a mile away from the missile silo, and it was faced at a cliff. If there is something now on just a surface level, if you heard these stories and you had any vested interest in national security, these would make your heart skip a beat. Arrow has gotten this testimony and then released reports saying that they have no credible evidence to suggest that any of these UAPs are a threat or have extraterrestrial origin. What's going on there?
I don't know. I think that Arrow, if they don't have facts or things that they can continue to investigate, then often they end the investigation. So in that event, and I'm not sure what the exact scenario is or what the case is, but I can imagine that if all they have to go on is testimony from an individual or basically the word of mouth of someone, there's not a whole lot for them to go to continue. So when we spoke with them, there's about 50 or so events that they do have enough to continue investigating that they do not have an answer for. But for them to be able to actually investigate, they have to have something to investigate. They have to have some kind of data or some kind of facts that they can that are outside of a testimony.
Right. Now, would you ever consider a hearing in which people like Bob Salas, Bob Jacobs, Bob Salas was a captain in the U.S. Air Force. Bob Jacobs, I'm not sure what rank he obtained, but he very, very high and credible. And he knows that, he filmed this thing. He filmed it. They called him into the office the next day. The base commander was there, and then private aeros. So I can't remember who else, but they were there and showed him the footage. So we know the footage exists. It's just, where is it? Where did it end up? And that is, I guess, what's frustrating. But would you guys ever, put people like that on the stand like you did with Elizondo?
I would. I think that we need to continue to have hearings. And so I would be willing to put anybody that's a credible witness on the stand.
Arrow deemed them credible enough to take their testimony. These guys, Bob Salas, if the president called and was to order a nuclear strike, he was one of the people that would turn the key. One of the two people. This guy is they have to report when they take ibuprofen. They are held and entrusted with our most dangerous and chaotic weapons. But ultimately, if something can come shut those off just like that, I mean, wouldn't you take a guy like that at his word?
Yeah, I think that we've had a lot of really credible witnesses come forward, from Gallaudet to,
Right.
you know, to the um, to the pilots that were testifying, um, in the Ryan Graves and others. These are very credible witnesses,
Yeah.
which is, these are not people living in their van down by the river. These are people that have got a great reputation.
Mhm.
And so I think that whenever, and my meeting was with Arrow, they acknowledge that the people that are coming forward are credible witnesses. They a lot of times when I asked them point blank, do you believe anybody's been lying to you, do you believe that what you've been hearing is, that the people, that it's true? And what the response that was given to me is that they believe that most everyone that's testified with them, is being earnest and being honest and being truthful. It doesn't necessarily mean that what they saw is what you think or what they think they saw. And so,
Right.
right, and so that's kind of where they fall back on. And I can imagine like Arrow, who hasn't received all the information they need to complete some of these investigations. But when you investigate thousands upon thousands of reports, and nearly every time you come to a conclusion, you're able to disprove it, eventually you become discouraged
Mhm.
and you start to believe that there isn't that it doesn't exist, right? And so I can understand their worldview and their perspective, and why they might be discouraged. And I
Right.
think that the reality is that the vast majority, I think almost all but maybe one or two events are, I'm still skeptical about those one or two events, but I think that their vast majority of them are debunked and are not accurately, are not truly, a um, uh, an analogous, some kind of phenomenon that we can't explain.
Okay.
So I think that there's only been a handful of events that are truly unexplained that we can continue to investigate, and there's a potential that of those handful of events that one or two of them might be real.
Yeah. Well, all that needs to only one needs to be
That's right.
real.
That's right.
That's it. Right? Just one. So what do you I'm not going to keep you too much longer. You've been so generous with your time today. Um what do you take of something like the Phoenix Lights, that essentially a whole city, and even Governor Fife Simonton later came out and said he saw it as well, even though at the time he made a gag of it in the press conference.
I'm not aware what they were, and I've seen some large balloon structures that could have imitated what was seen over Phoenix. Um, I think that one of the things that people have to keep in mind, these drones that we talked about in New Jersey, when you look at these light shows, we're now entering an era where people can send drones in the sky and create any potential object that they might want to make you see, right? So
They're
I think we're going to
crazy.
see a lot of pranksters and a lot of things that can be created that will make you think it's a UFO, right? And so I think that we have got to be a lot more skeptical about the things that are coming out today. In fact, I think that the evidence, the documentation, the photos, the videos, or anything that we've collected prior to now has more credibility than anything that's gonna be new going forward, especially with AI, right? AI
I
is going. So many people can create something that looks real on their personal computer.
I said that, I think, in literally the last episode. I said, I think some of the most of the documentation and the evidence collected to date is now going to be worth more going in going into the future because of what you just said. It'll become more valuable because the technology wasn't there to do it, right? To fake it. Actually, speaking of that, does it ever scare you to think about how fast AI is developing and how more likely a bad actor is to do something with it that, like a kind of like a false flag style operation carried out by a state actor?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be bad things that are going to happen, but we can't shy away from it, right? So the internet brought with it tremendous benefit to society, but also some harm, right? People have been susceptible to fraud, that people have been hacked. There's been not everything that's happened on the internet has been good for humanity, but by and
Oh, hell
large, I
no.
don't think that anyone would say let's eliminate the internet because of all the harms. And I think the same thing will happen with AI. And I totally dismiss this concept that it's going to make humans um, of no value. Well, that's like saying that the wheat harvester or the cotton gin made humans of complete like not of no value whatsoever.
Right.
Humanity finds a way to provide value, and as long as there are people, there will be value, and there will be in the work in which they create. And I think that um, and every and one of these innovations raises our standard of living and our lifestyle to the next level. So I'm glad that we have combines that harvest. My ancestors all worked on a farm, and I'm able to be in politics, and my family are all able to do other things because we no
Don't have
longer
to
because
be on the
we
field.
don't have to work hours and hours a week just to produce the food that we need to eat. So,
Right. Right. I can absolutely get behind that. Absolutely.
but to your point, I
Um,
think that there's going to be a point in which um, in which people say everything prior to now is of the pre-AI era, whether it's music
mm,
or movies or books or photos or whatever it is. It's going to be pre-AI, and then everything after this era is going to be the AI, era. And so it's I think that it's going to change. It's going to change the way in which we look at things, and I think that it'll probably give more value to authentically made things.
right. Like, because people always are going to want that human touch, right?
Right.
And I absolutely agree with you. Um, with that being said, with AI and the leaps and bounds forward that we're about to take, uh, honestly, d- we have a new administration coming in. Obviously, the administration, the Trump administration, is seemingly trying to do things differently than before.
Mhm.
And whether that's bringing in someone like Elon Musk to run the Department of Government Efficiency, um, should should the president take action and create something like that for UAP and maybe hire Elizondo, Grush, and get them in there and do what you've been talking about, and kind of bring the government from this geriatric age up
Yeah.
into this new age that is changing almost on a daily basis.
Yeah, apparently under when Lou was involved with ATIP, there was a decision that was made by the administration. They were reviewing whether or not to release to the public the information what the federal government knew about UAPs, and eventually they decided that now is not the time. So I think that the Trump administration, he's talked about the JFK files.
Right.
He's he's talked about releasing some other information. I think that he wants to be the disclosure president, and so I think that we need to remind his administration. We need to make it top of mind that the public wants that. And I think Trump he's a man of the people. He wants his legacy to be known as someone who represented the people and came in to DC, um, and that he's not part of the system. He's one of us. And I think that because of that, we need to constantly be advocating to his administration and to anyone that he might be listening to that it's time for disclosure and that he could be the president that does it.
In what other way? I mean, not that he will not be remembered already because of just the resilience and
Mhm.
taking a bullet and then I mean, I don't like to get too political on the show, but that image of him after being shot where oh God, and the only way that photo was possible was because the Secret Service was so inept that day and had like someone my height um defending him or being the body in front of him. But that picture of him, fight. If there was at that moment, I remember saying he just walked into the White House. I mean, this guy will be remembered. But what other way to solidify that than
Mhm.
to at least disclose what we know and what we can know? I, I think there's not an American here that will say national security should be jeopardized for disclosure. I don't think so. Um, but there's a
Right.
way to do both.
Yeah, there is, and I think and David Grush and I have had conversations about this, and he's provided like a framework for how he worked with another individual for how they think that there's a responsible way to provide disclosure. And so I'm trying to get that in the hands of Mike Waltz, who's one of my colleagues. He sits next to me on the Oversight Committee.
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, he and the Trump administration are going to be the ones that make this decision. And hopefully they'll embrace disclosure.
Do you so do you do you in the next 4 years, do you think that we will see or we'll be having a radically different conversation um, based on your view of the Trump administration and what their goals seem to be? Um, are you hopeful for the next 4 years?
I'm hopeful, but there's also a part of me that I've been disappointed by my colleagues. I think that Trump wants to do the big bold things. There's a lot of my colleagues that don't, and so I'm tepidly hopeful.
I think that's a good way to yeah, I think that's a good way to do it, to look at it. Um, I think just a lot of people right now with tensions in the Middle East, tensions in Russia and the Ukraine. I think I there's a lot on his plate. There's a lot on his plate walking in, and big shoes to fill, and that concerns me because I don't think you shouldn't have to inherit something like this. We're in 2024. How is this something that it feels primitive almost.
Yeah, this is I think that we're at a place where I think that things are moving very quickly. To put it in the terms of Ferris Bueller.
Yeah,
And I think it's only going to get quicker.
and that's what I mean. Every day things are changing. Um, so um, obviously, would you said it earlier. I'm just gonna ask it because it's the last question. But would you support more extensive hearings dedicated solely to UAPs and their implications for national security and science?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All
Absolutely.
the hearings, I think the more that we are transparent with the public, that look, the public doesn't trust the government. I don't trust the government. So the more the information that we can have, the better.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And you have done an excellent job I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you so much for giving so much time of your day when you didn't have to. I really do appreciate that.
Appreciate it, Ty. Keep up the great work. You have a great podcast, and I look forward to continue to listen.
Yeah, and I look forward to like I said, I want to keep the dialogue open, and you damn sure I'll be at the next hearings, and I'm hoping that the next hearings really, really start the year and start this new administration with a bang.
Well,
So
next time, feel free to come by my office either before or after.
okay.
Mi casa is su casa.
Oh my God, thank you so much. That means the world to me, my friend. And we're you're on X, you're on you have a website. How can people that aren't in your district and in your district, how can they get a hold of you and follow what you're doing?
I'm on all the socials. Name is Eric Burlison, so just look for Burlison, spelled with a Burlison. So
Yeah, I'll put all the links in the description below as well for everything that you got going. And thank you for everything and for your service to this country, my friend. And to everyone out there in the podcast sphere, you know what it is. We'll see you next time. Keep your eye to the sky because you never know what might fly by.